You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 9, Episode 1. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friends, and welcome to Season 9 of Feathers. I am so happy to be back after a long summer break. Thank you so much for your patience. I actually had planned to have a summer season, but y'all, maybe it's a different story for another time, but I have been battling adrenal fatigue and really just trying to get my body back on track. I'm not there yet, but I am feeling so much better. And I'm so thankful to have the energy to be able to do this fall 2018 season. So welcome back. I want to get right to it. My guest to kick off the season is Jessica Honegger. Jessica is the founder and co-CEO of Noonday Collection, the world's largest fair trade jewelry company. I have loved Noonday for many, many years. If you have been a listener of Feathers since Season 1, you may remember I had a Noonday ambassador on named Wendy Hogan. And Jessica shares with us today her leap of faith of starting Noonday Collection, and we chat about being working moms and what it looks like to take our own leaps of faith with what she calls imperfect courage. So let's kick it off. Here is my conversation with Jessica. Well, hey, Jessica, and welcome to Feathers today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to get to chat with you today.
Oh my goodness. You are helping us kick off our 9th season of Feathers. And so I am just so excited to be talking to you.
That is amazing. Congratulations. That is no joke. How many episodes is that?
Well, I do 16 episodes. I think we're like on, it's a good question. I think we're like on like 125, 130, something like that.
That is legit. That's a lot of podcasts. I get it. I started a podcast like 5 months ago, and I think we're on like episode 24. So I can't imagine being at episode 120 something.
Yes, it is a labor of love. That's for sure.
It is. It truly is.
Yeah. So I would just love for you to introduce yourself, your family, and kind of all what you're involved in to people that are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. So I am Jessica, and I am the CEO, co-CEO, and founder of Noonday Collection, which is a socially conscious fashion brand. I've got 3 kids, 12-year-old, 8-year-old, and 9-year-old. Everyone just had that switch. So I always fumble over the ages when it's like that seasonal switch time. I have an amazing husband, and I have a podcast called the Going Scared Podcast. And as well, I just wrote a book called Imperfect Courage, Living a Life of Purpose by Leaving Comfort and Going Scared. And I wrote it because I have a passion to really catalyze women to live lives of courage. I think for so long, I thought courage was available to an elite group of heroic people like Martin Luther King or like the firefighters of 9/11. But what I've realized through my journey, especially my journey of starting Noonday Collection, that courage for me was feeling the fear and going anyway. That's really what courage boils down to. And I know I spent a lot of years wondering what my purpose was. I spent a lot of couch surfing time, and now I really want other women to join me in getting up off of our couches and living this life of impact that's available to all of us.
Yes, I think that's so true. I say that often on this podcast, and I just love your book. It's just like if you could encapsulate the podcast down to a book and get a good sense of what this podcast is about, it actually would be your book because
that's so cool.
Yes, and it's really all about doing it scared. And one of the things that I often say is fear is a flag. And for me, fear is a flag that you're getting ready to do something awesome. It's, a lot of times we think fear is the thing. It's a flag. Oh, I shouldn't do that because my body is saying no and I'm scared. But oftentimes when it's things, when you get this flag and you fear, I've found that that's where you need to lean into actually. And there's going to be something awesome on the other side of that fear.
Well, because it shows that you care. It shows that you matter. If it matters enough for you to get that beating heart and it's all about stepping outside of our comfort, right? Because I think we can see the flag, we can feel the flag, And that's our moment of decision. Are we going to move into the uncomfortable, or are we going to keep choosing comfort? Because doing those things that we really want to do, that requires effort, and it requires ripping off the bubble wrap that we want to insulate our lives with and actually walking through that place of discomfort. And I think sometimes we think, well, gosh, if it's uncomfortable or if it requires a lot of effort, like if it doesn't just come natural, then maybe that means that I'm not going in the right direction. And I say that actually means you are going in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. And I love one of the things that you said in the book, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it was about, it's kind of like you get your courage legs. Is that the way you say it? I think you've been posting it on Instagram recently. Like you get your courage legs as you do it.
Yeah, as you walk. I mean, I remember when all of my kids were trying to walk, and I know you said a lot of your listeners are moms, and remember when your kids, like, I don't know, I think mine were around like 12 months, and they're taking those first steps, and you're not like, oh man, you didn't get it right. Like, no, I mean, the first step is that huge deal, and you celebrate it. And that's how your toddlers learn how to walk, is by walking. And that's how we learn how to go scared and how to live this courageous life, is by simply taking those steps and then not berating ourselves. I think that's the problem, is we might take a few steps moving in that right direction, moving in the place of walking through our fear, and then we fall. Well, guess what? Life is full of falls. Like, if there's one thing in life that we can guarantee, is that you're going to fall. So if you just accept that as part of life, and then you learn how to get back up and keep walking in that direction, that's where that life of purpose is lived. By learning that resilience to just keep standing back up again. Like, expect that you're going to fall. That's just life, but when you learn how to fly, when you access that faith and you keep moving in that direction.
Amen. That's so true. Well, I want to talk about this specifically in your life and how you have seen this play out, really, because I had not heard actually the whole background of Noonday before I read your book. I actually have had, all the way back in season 1, I had one of your ambassadors, Wendy Hogan, on.
Oh, you did. I love Wendy.
Yes.
She is so cool.
Yep. She started listening in the first season, and she emailed me. She's like, I would really like to share how I took a leap of faith to be an ambassador. And
that is so cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of like full circle back. I don't know, to have you on and talk really about, even further back, the original leap of faith you took. And so I love Noonday. I've hosted Trump shows at my house. Like I've I've entered Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So I love Noonday, and it's so cool to actually, and I've somehow in all of that had never heard the whole story about how Noonday started. And what's amazing to me is that, if I were to go back and tell you the story of how this podcast started, it really was birthed out of the adoption in our family.
No way!
Yes, we adopted from
foster
care here in the United States. Our son was 8 years old, and actually we just celebrated this month 4 years that he's
Congratulations,
been home.
That's huge.
Thank you. So what I realized is that your story was birthed out of adoption, really. That definitely was a part of the beginnings of Noonday. So I would love for you just to take a few minutes to talk about, what could it look like for something like this? I mean, you guys are now the biggest fair trade company. I don't know.
We're the largest fair trade accessories brand in America, and Inc. named us the third fastest growing company owned by women in 2015. I mean, it's been a crazy ride.
Yes, congratulations. So I just would love to step back, and what does this look like at the very beginning? What could this look like for our listeners?
What this looks like. Oh my goodness. It's so crazy. What it looked like was sweaty palms and scrappiness and a whole lot of fear. My husband and I had been flipping homes in the real estate market, aka Chip and Joanna Gaines style. And we had a couple houses, and then the market started crashing pretty quickly in 2008. And we barely got out of the skin of our teeth from flipping homes. And then we transitioned and becoming full-time realtors right when no one's buying and selling houses. And right during that time, of starting, our real estate career and flipping homes, we had decided to grow our family through adoption. So we had 2 biological kids and wanted to really be open to how we would bring our 3rd child into our family. And as we prayed, we really landed on adopting from Rwanda, which is a crazy story. I had a friend who was interviewing for a job with International Justice Mission in Rwanda. And he was there, and he emailed me when he was there, and he said, Jessica, I heard that you're scoping out adoption right now. And I just met a woman who adopted a little boy from Rwanda, and she wants to help other American families adopt. Do you want me to get in touch with her? And I mean, Rwanda wasn't even on my radar at all, and I was like, well, okay, that's not going to hurt. We're in the research process. Well, as I began researching Rwandan adoptions, a blog came up, and I contacted that person, and she's like, oh yeah, I'd love to tell you kind of the ins and outs. We just started a few months ago. I'm a few months ahead of you. Well, as I looked closer, I realized it was my roommate from my junior year of college.
So crazy. Oh my gosh.
So crazy. So God just made Rwanda so beautifully apparent, which is wonderful. So we start moving in this direction of Rwanda. We know it's going to be around 20 to 30K. We've got a nest egg for it. We're feeling all confident in ourselves. Like, okay, we've got this. Like, the bubble wrap is there to protect us. And before you know it, the market's crashing, and we are living off of that money. And then we literally didn't have any closing in the pipeline. What we did have in the pipeline, people were literally walking away from the closing table. And before you knew it, we were living off of that nest egg. And then we were putting groceries on the credit card. And that was such a challenging time, feeling totally desperate and feeling like, oh my gosh, now we're going into debt. What is ever the way out of this? And yet we still didn't think God had changed his mind, about this adoption.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like at this point, you would say the money's gone. Clearly we had it wrong. God doesn't want us to adopt. That's a closed door. We're not going to go anywhere.
That would have been very easy to say. Absolutely. Like it's a closed door. But I don't know, like God had already made it so apparent that this was the door we were supposed to walk through, and I wasn't about to turn back around. And I remember my dad, he was part of the Almost Kiwanis Club, which is kind of like this volunteer group for men. And I remember at Christmas, we would always go ring the bell of the Salvation Army, the bell, the red bell. Mm-hmm. And I would stand out with my dad, and I thought, I don't care if I have to go ring the bell. Like I'm going to find a way to get money to make this happen. And, right around that time, I had remembered a previous conversation a few months before when we'd actually visited Africa during the research process. And some friends of mine had said, hey, Jess, we have got some accessories that have been handmade by this really amazing couple, Ugandan couple, Jalia and Daniel. And they've made these beautiful accessories, and they're just sitting in America waiting to be sold. And we're wondering if you would sell them. And I listened to them and I thought, okay, that's really cool. And that's a great story. But no way. I've got a real estate business. I got 2 kids. I'm about to start this adoption process. Like, thanks, but I'm not your girl. Well, fast forward literally maybe 5 months later, and I am texting them saying, hey, remember those products that you had saying, sitting in storage? Can I sell those? Like, we've really fallen on some harder times and we need money for this adoption. And they were super gracious actually and said, yeah, and just have it. Like you can just keep the profits for your adoption. So that was my first step towards Noonday Collection, but I had no idea at the time that that's actually what was happening. I opened up my home one night. I was convinced no one was going to come. Then I was sure if they did come, they would write me off as this desperate person. And we were still needing to make a go of it as realtors. And so here I am, like, who wants to hire someone who's obviously not successful? Like, they obviously are not doing well if they're needing to open up their home to sell things. And because I didn't just sell the African goods, I was like selling the plates. I was selling grandma's plates. I was selling my clothes. Yeah. I mean, if it could be sold, you could buy it. And so I remember just experiencing a lot of fear that week of expecting the worst. Again, that thought, like, what if I fall? You know, there's that quote and it says, what if I fall, my darling, but what if you fly? And I was about to fly, but I was planning for the fall. And I almost canceled. I really almost canceled because it was so uncomfortable. You know, you feel the fear and you think, you know what, I could just go back to sitting on my couch. Like, that actually felt a little bit better. It felt a little more comfortable. But I'm so glad I didn't cancel because I had women show up. And that's the thing. That is the story of Noonday, has been that women want to show up for one another. And when we show up, we go up and we bring other women along with us. And I had over 60 women in my home that night. They rallied around our adoption. They wanted to help Jalia and Daniel, this couple in Uganda. And there was this one necklace that people went crazy over, and it sold out. And women were like, can I get more? I mean, can I open my home? Can we do this in my house? Like, this stuff is amazing. And so the next morning I texted my friends and I said, okay, everything's sold. And they texted back and said, well, why not, instead of using this to seed your adoption fund, why don't you use this to seed a business? And why don't we'll connect you to Jolly and Daniel, and you can place an order with them and start seeing if you can keep doing this. And so honestly, without giving it a ton of thought, without even, setting up a business right then, I mean, I immediately contacted them and I went and set up a Western Union account. I started saying, hey, could you make this? Could you make this? Unbeknownst to me, they had no idea how to make anything that I was asking of them. But they, on the other side, were like, we're going to figure it out. We're not going to say no to this opportunity. And within a month, I had more product that got shipped to me. I had already asked more women to open up their homes, and I started carting stuff all over Texas. I started leaving Austin pretty quickly, and within a few months had really turned this little fundraiser into a business. And it was about 8 months in where, you mentioned Wendy as a Noonday ambassador. We launched the ambassador opportunity about 8 months in because I had other women who were also trying to raise money for their adoptions. They loved the product. They wanted to create sustainable income opportunities for the women living in the countries where they were adopting from. They knew that adoption is not a solution to the orphan crisis, but sustainable income is. And so we launched the ambassador opportunity, and that was other women coming alongside me where they could earn an income while also making an impact. We started off with just a handful of women in the first 2 months and now have almost 2,000, including Wendy, who's I just love her. Yes. She's so awesome. Excuse me. And that's really what launched Noonday Collection. And now Jalia and Daniel, they have 100 full-time employees. They are no longer poor. They really have stepped into their potential as leaders of Uganda, and walking with them has been one of my greatest life joys.
And that's what I just love about Noonday and this whole story, is that God was using this to provide for you to rescue Jack, your son, but even more than that and so much bigger than that is that he was providing life for Jaya and Daniel and so many of the other artisans that you're working with. It's just kind of like a win-win-win all the way around. And it's just incredible to see, how many years has it been? Was it 8 years?
It's been 8 years.
Golly, that's incredible. Goodness, I just love everything that Noonday is about, and how it's working for the artisans, it's working for you and your family as a business, and all the other women that are involved that are either, funding their own adoption or just funding their own business, and being independent on their own, which is so incredible. A couple things that there's so many things that different directions I could go with this. One thing that I wanted to pull out really from your book that you talked about is how first of all, is that I think a lot of times when we are trying to find what God wants to do, we have a tendency to always look at our strengths, always look at the things that are our desires, always look at the things that make sense. And yet, when you look back at your history and you look at Noonday, it wasn't your desire. It wasn't what you were educated in. It was not what you were, traditionally brought up for.
Right.
Basically,
Right.
you talk about in the book that you just were not. This was not the ideal thing for you. And I just want you to speak to that a little bit, because I think sometimes maybe it's the Western world that we try to make things, fit well.
Makes
and yet
sense.
sometimes,
Yeah.
God wants us to go into places that don't make sense at all.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I had this awakening in high school when I had gone to Kenya. And that's where I saw international poverty for the first time and really realized, wow, I've been given a lot of opportunity. And how can I use my opportunity to create opportunity for others? And I met a woman who was running a fruit stand at the time. And my local Kenyan friend said she got a microcredit loan. And because of that microcredit loan, she was able to start this fruit stand, get out of an abusive marriage, and she's now providing for all of her children. And that really stood out to me. I'd never heard of this idea of a microcredit loan, and gosh, that even like $20 to $50 could really change the life of a woman in Africa and empower her. And that stood with me. And I came back to my high school and I was like the raging activist, and I was like the judgmental girl who's like, how can you carry a designer bag? But that was really where my heart was awakened to, I want to do something to impact the poor. And I think we've all had those moments. But the only way that I thought was a pathway was, okay, well, I'll try social work. So I started off in college in social work. And then I was like, oh, I don't really like paperwork, and, I'm not really great with a one-on-one. Maybe I'll just study Latin American studies and study a culture. And then after college, I went with Food for the Hungry International, and I went and helped midwives in Bolivia and did like nursing. Okay, that was like not a good fit. Wow. And then after that, I went and moved to Guatemala, where I taught, and I enjoyed teaching. And that's where I thought, okay, education can be a way to really impact poverty. And so I moved back to America, got married, and then started working for an at-risk youth program, working with youth in education, got a little bit burned out, went and worked at a jewelry store for a year where I sold wedding china and very high-end like diamond jewelry to customers. After that, my husband and I got into house flipping, started a real estate career. And in the middle of that, I got my master's in education, because I still was like, well, education is the way to impact the poor, so I'm still going to walk in this direction. And as I look back, like, I was really living into a should narrative. If I love the poor, if I want to make an impact, then I need to go into a helping profession. I tried social work, I tried nursing, and I tried teaching. And that was like the path that I thought that you needed to take if you really loved the poor. Well, I am terrible at all that. You do not want me teaching your children. You do not want me to be there for you in the hospital. Like,
Nurse Jessica.
I'm just Jessica. And I look back, and what I do have is like, I'm a salesperson. Like when I was a kid, I used to pick my neighbor's flowers, tie a bow around it, and go knock on their door and sell it to them as a bouquet. Like I like catalyzing people. I was president of my student council, of my student body, and I like kind of like organizing people and helping like see others people see their potential. But I think because I didn't have a model, like you can't become what you don't see. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was wonderful, but I thought for years, okay, that's going to be my path. Like I'm really just supposed to get a teaching degree, move back home, get married, support my husband's career. That didn't sound life-giving to me, but that was my should script. That was the script you walked in. And I just hadn't opened myself up to this idea of like, okay, I have a heart to impact the poor. Like that's what gives me the pitter patter. Well, what could that look like? Like how could I step into entrepreneurship? And, that just wasn't something that naturally I thought I could do, that was an available opportunity for me. And I like to say that courage cornered me. And I'm so glad that it did, because, I think oftentimes we're in a place of feeling cornered and we think it's our end, but I think that's when we begin. When we take that moment of desperation and we choose to stand up instead of stay seated, that can be the beginning of so much. And like, leave our should stories, leave that place of like, well, if I want to do this, then these are my routes, and really open yourself up to, what's my unique route that I can take. And, mine was, fashion, and mine was jewelry, and mine was, hustling and spending the night on people's couches and asking them to open up their homes to me. And frankly, it still is. Like, now that I'm out, like, doing this book, I'm doing this book tour, and I'm doing tons of media and interviews, and I'm feeling that same exhilaration. Like, I actually went to a baby shower yesterday, and I was sitting with this group of girls, and they all knew Noonday. They love Noonday. And I was like, well, guys, have you bought my book yet? And they're like, well, not yet. I'm like, well, I'd love to invite my book, because I promise you that there's a message in there for you that will change your life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just got invited to a baby shower and I'm selling my book,
Yep. Just a salesperson through and through. Yeah. It's
true.
so interesting. It's so interesting that like the book is like a leap of faith on its own. And
Totally.
Yeah.
It's so weird to have built a career now 8 years in with Noonday, and then really start over in a lot of ways and get people to take the leap of seeing me as someone who can speak into their lives, not just, as an entrepreneur and as a CEO, but also as a thought leader, and this idea around living more courageously.
Yes. Well, I love this whole idea of letting go of our should scripts. I think that's so powerful. And really what I hear is just the invitation to dream with God. And what could this look like? I have a heart to make a difference and live awake, but what can that look like for me? And letting go, like intentionally letting go of the should scripts in our mind of what that could look like, and seeing how God would speak to that.
How do we, I think it's a daily challenge on how do we leave our should scripts? 'Cause I think we all have them.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I just really would love for you to share is just on this journey, how God provided over and over. And clearly he provided the funds for your adoption. That was one thing, that he provided from the outset. But I just think it's a really cool story how God even provided the people to come alongside of you to do this dream. And you talk a lot about, community in your book as well, and how important that is. Talk about how, God just brought Travis alongside with you to help you start the company. Before Jessica tells us this really cool story of provision, I wanted to drop in here to tell you some really, really exciting news. Dayspring has partnered with us for season 9, which means I get to tell you about a few awesome projects that are launching this fall. One of them is so close to my heart, and that is the Encourage Women's Devotional Bible. And I actually wrote 2 of the devotionals in the book, and I could not be more excited about that. The Bible will be available on October 1st, 2018. So if you're hearing this before then you can pre-order it. We'll have a link in the show notes, or you can hop over to your favorite book retailer and either pre-order that or pick it up depending on when you're listening. So I'm looking forward to spending this season telling you more about the Bible and more about some other projects that Dayspring has going on. So for now, let's get back to my conversation with Jessica.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I loved sharing this story, truly, because that first year of Noonday, when I say I was scared, a lot of it was, I was scared of what other people were going to think. I was scared of like looking desperate. But when it came time to, this is a business that I really want to scale, I knew that I needed help. And we were in a sink or swim moment. At this point now, Joe, my husband, and I were about to go fly over to Rwanda, get Jack. I had signed up like 8 ambassadors. So these women are kind of counting on me to deliver. I mean, they're going out and telling their community and getting their customers. And so it's obvious that I am doing this as a business. And I thought, well, I need help. So I started praying for $50,000. I thought, well, if 50 grand, I could hire a young person to help me run the operations and do all the behind the scenes and all that stuff that I'm not very good at. And I started meeting with a friend of mine that I had met in Africa several years prior. I knew his wife. I'd grown up with his wife, and Joe and I were in Africa, to work at an orphanage and kind of continue to scope out sustainable solutions to poverty. And we went out to dinner with Travis and Suzanne one night, and just had a lovely dinner. And then it was a couple years later where they moved to Austin, and I helped them with their home. I helped them during one of my like real estate stints with their house. And I knew that he had a business background. I knew that he had the similar heart as me because we had met in Africa where he had been running a microfinance loan bank. And so I said, hey, Travis, can we get together and just, can you help me like look over the numbers, look over my business model? I know I'm selling stuff like crazy. I actually don't really know how profitable this all is. So we started meeting before he went off to work early in the mornings. And after about a month of meeting, he said to me, Jessica, Suzanne and I have been saving up our whole lives. And, you know, he'd worked on Wall Street for a hot minute, and he'd had a really successful career, and he had a savings account for when that time came for him to either buy a business or invest in a business. He'd always wanted to be an owner operator. And he said to me, can we be partners? Can we go in 50-50? And I'm willing to go salary free until we can actually make this a viable, profitable company. And that was really my moment of truth, because it's one thing to risk on myself, to risk failing myself, to risk my reputation. But it's another thing when someone is going to live off their life savings account. They had 3 kids. One of them had Down syndrome. So Suzanne was fully devoted to all of Jack's needs, their little boy's needs. And so this was it for them. And that is when fear really crept in, because I just thought, I don't want someone else to take a risk on me and then I failed them. And then I also realized now I needed to fully be all in. Even though I was technically all in, I think in my heart it was like, okay, this means like I'm a full-on working mom. And that was a narrative that I struggled with so much, because that had not been a narrative that had been laid out to me before. And so I naturally thought if I really wanted to be a good mom, I needed to be a stay-at-home mom. Like a working mom and a good mom were completely mutually exclusive, to the point of me very easily judging working moms. And I'm so sorry for all of you listening. And I'm sorry to myself, because I judged myself for years as the CEO of Noonday because of that. So I came to that moment of, what narrative am I going to follow? And it was the morning that we were coming to this point of decision where we really needed to decide, you know, because he was getting ready to quit his job and go all in. And I was just really praying through all of my fears. And I opened the Bible to Ephesians, where it says, you are God's workmanship, created in his image to do good works, which God has prepared for you in advance. And in that scripture, the word workmanship actually means poem. You are God's poem. And so there was this sense that God was like, you're my poem. Like, I've written all of these things into your being, and this is the work that I have prepared for you. Walk in it. And Travis and I were meeting that afternoon with a business counselor to help us hash through if this was really going to be a good partnership. And we were halfway through the meeting, and this business counselor looked at me and he said, Jessica, you are God's workmanship. You're created in his image to do good works, which he's prepared for you in advance. I really think Noonday is the work. And you cannot, according to your personality, you're only going to jump if you think you're going to be 100% successful. And that's just not reality. That's not life. There's no guarantees, you know. And that in that moment I knew like this was the leap that I was gonna take. And it's been an incredible journey, you know. I mean, Noonday wouldn't exist without Travis, and you know, we have an incredible partnership, and our skill sets complement each other. Our worldviews are so similar, and it's pretty crazy that is how the story went. But you know, it's one thing when you're going to risk on yourself, but it's another thing when someone wants to take a risk on you. And that really truly is, I think, where life is lived, though, because, you know, my favorite part of the book is the middle part, which is really about going at it together. And Noonday really only got going when I let other people starting to take risks on me, when I brought other ambassadors on and I was responsible for getting the packages to their customers. And, when I took Travis on and it was like, okay, we got to make this work because, I don't want your family to be homeless. And we did. We went salary free for 2 years and his bank account got back down to zero, and thankfully it's not at zero anymore. And we were able to be a successful and profitable company. And still, that's why I'm hitting the road right now, because we believe Noonday has barely scratched the surface, and we want everyone across America to open up their homes to the women of the world that we're partnering with in order to bring flourishing to their communities. When we look across the globe, we don't see strangers, we see ourselves, and we really want to catalyze that across the nation. But yeah, that was a crazy moment for me, a very big moment of faith. Am I going to walk in faith and let someone else put their faith in me?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I get chills even when you share that. It's just incredible to me that you had this need, you pray about it, and it's not just that he just provided, it's just that how he had prepared Travis and his family for years, really. It's like, this was not like just a one-time thing. It was like this, God had been putting this into motion for years to prepare him to be able to come alongside, Noonday and to be able to do this. So
that's so true.
I just think it's so cool how God just weaves all of this together, and connects you guys and then just moves it forward. So, I just think I want to encourage listeners that, if you feel like, God is calling you to do something, but you feel like he hasn't provided something for you, whether it's finances or people, like God will provide.
He will. And look for that story. Because again, what if I fall? I think we spend a lot of mental energy on what if I fall? What if I fall? Why don't you spend energy on where is God showing up for me? Look to confirm that story today, because you will find it. You will find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where the word feathers came from. It's just like, even in our story, how God even confirmed his work, like in feathers, in literal feathers showing up in my path. So God can work and confirm things in a lot of different ways. But I want to circle back to what you were talking about is you becoming a working mom through this. And I was telling you before we were recording is just how much that message through the book really surprised me. Because I had never considered, it's like, oh, wow, because she launched Noonday, now she becomes a working mom. And that's actually something you struggle through. So I've been a working mom for all of the years I've been a mom, for the last almost 16 years. And it's just something my mom had a business in our home. So my mom was working. But so I did have kind of that, that person in my life that was doing that. I have had this message, and even up until recently, really struggling with this. A good mom doesn't work, right? She stays home full time. So there was some really freeing message, I think, in the book for me about that, and especially about working moms outside of the United States. And how you connected with that and helped you free you up from that message. I would love for you to speak a little bit more into that.
Yeah, what's crazy is my mom did have a little wreath business, making floral arrangements. And so she did technically work, and yet it was considered a little side gig, a little thing. And when my dad would come home from work, she would clean it up really quickly so that her domestic duties would reign supreme. And so I think it's interesting because I was doing real estate before this, but again, it's like I diminished that, it was like this should thing. Well, it's like, well, the mom thing is the primary, so I'm just going to diminish this side thing that I have. And that was just kind of the model that I had grown up with. And so now when I brought Travis on, that was my moment of like, well, I can't just say this is a side thing. Eventually we're going to get an office space. We still worked out of my home for like a year, including Travis. He literally officed out of the guest bathroom was his office. But then eventually it was like, okay, we gotta actually go get space. And that was my moment of like, oh, now I have to drive to work. Now I have to get dressed for work. I can't say that I'm got like a little home business working from my home. I think that had been part of my cover. Again, completely about the perception of what other people would think of me, And as I began to step into my role at Noonday, and I began to travel and start meeting so many different women around the world, I was launching Noonday in order to create working opportunities for moms. Like that's ultimately what I was doing. And so I'm traveling in Africa, I'm traveling in Guatemala, and I'm meeting these women that are so grateful that they're able to work, that they have jobs. And I'm thinking, what a privileged conversation I've had in my head. Like, this woman isn't feeling guilty about being working a mom. She's feeling so proud that she's able to provide for her family. And she's like a wonderful mom. Like, her kids are super bonded to her, you know? I mean, she loves her children. And it was when I was putting my little girl to bed one night. She was around 5 years old, maybe 6, because this sounds awfully, it was probably more around 6 or 7. And she said to me, Mommy, I'm so glad that we adopted Jack, because if we wouldn't have adopted Jack, you know, we wouldn't have Noonday. And Noonday has changed so many lives, but Mommy, it's helped our family so much. Mm. And that was my moment of realizing Noonday wasn't at the expense of my family. It was for their flourishing too. And I could hold both of these things. And it was just a lie that you can't be a good mom and a working mom. And me really embracing that I could do both and I could walk in both, and that God was asking me to walk in both was really the day that I just began walking in a lot of freedom. And I have so much freedom now in that area, just immense freedom. And I look now and I think about the woman that came into our life. We had the same nanny for 5 years who helped with the kids, and like, she's part of the family, you know, and you know, we kind of piecemealed it together. So she probably worked 20 hours a week for us. And I just think like the influence she got to have in my kid's life and the memories that you know, I mean, so there's just so much goodness, in being able to embrace the both and then also if a woman's listening right now and they're like, well, I have a side thing, like, you know, don't treat it like a side thing. Like it's a beautiful thing. It's like a valuable thing, and don't like put it as second to whatever your husband's doing, you know, like it matters. It matters.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, after reading that, I think it's just going to give me so much more freedom. Even so many years. I mean, so many years of asking God, like, do you want me to keep working? Like, I'll quit. You know, like, if you want me to quit, I'll quit. But, like, always feeling like God was leading me to work. And I just have to reconcile, like, if God is saying, yes, Amy, work, then he is going to make it okay for my kids, you know?
Yes.
He's not. I'm like, God, are you sure? Like, are you sure? Because are my kids going to be okay? And obviously, if he's given me the permission, then it's there. And it doesn't matter, you know, and he always tells me, he's like, Amy, it doesn't matter what they, quote, they say, it matters what I say. And if I say it's okay to work, then it's okay to work.
Absolutely.
And, you know, there probably are some people that, you know, maybe God has something different for you than what you're doing. I think it all just boils down to, you know, really searching out God. What does he have for you and your family? And it's okay if it looks different for all of us.
Yes. Don't compare your story to someone else's story.
Yes. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for including that in your book, because I know it's given me so much freedom since reading it. And I know it's
so glad. That makes me, that makes me so, so happy. It was interesting, like, speaking, and I'm sure you find this in your podcast, like you want to speak to that mom who's working, but then you also don't want to diminish the mom who's not, you know, and I think the book does get to that. It's just about like, get rid of your should story and find your real narrative and lean into that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay. My goodness. Well, I want to just wrap up just to talk about, you know, what you talked about kind of at the end is really encouraging women to live awake, and how, you know, one of the things that you said you don't want people to walk away with is, oh, I need to go start some kind of like business like Noonday. Right.
Right.
So what would you say to people who's like, oh, I want to live awake, I want to make a difference, you know, like this, I want to find my narrative. Like, what do you think are some next steps for a person like that?
You know, I think that find that thing that makes your heart go pitter patter. Find that thing that, you know, is it foster care? Does that light you on fire? Is it the justice system? Is it, you know, the orphan crisis that's going on in the world? Like, listen to your heart. You know, we keep crying out like, God, show me. But then we forget to just look inside to where God actually dwells and to look into our own unique, we're the poem, remember? And each of us is a unique poem with its own stanza to the world. And so, I think, and really challenge where are you having some should narratives in your life, and follow these heartbeats, and remember that it's not about perfectionism. I think a perfectionistic mentality is like all or nothing. Like, I have to quit my job now and go work full time. Or if you have a heart for foster care, I actually need to foster kids. But there's so many different avenues to making an impact. And I think it's just owning like those small steps and not becoming paralyzed by a perfectionistic mentality. So just what's one thing that you can do today that serves that need in the world that God's uniquely given you a heart for?
Yes, that is so true. And I love your book. It even goes even deeper to talk about this and in different ways that you can kind of suss out, where God might be leading you, whether it's, being generous financially or just, with being close to a different type of people than you normally would.
Yes.
All of that. So, definitely want people to pick up the book so they can read more. But, Jessica, I have so enjoyed talking to you, and, just love to see how God has worked in your life. So I appreciate you sharing. I know you got some fun things coming up in September. I would love for you to, share about some upcoming things with your book and, what's going on next.
Yes. Well, right now in September, first of all, we would love for you to join us as a Noonday Collection ambassador. We have a special going on right now. You can go to our website to check that out, noondaycollection.com. We'd love for you to open up your home to host a Noonday Trunk Show. In fact, if you open up your home, you can get a copy of my book along with an exclusive bracelet. So, go to our website, sign up to host a trunk show, find me on Instagram, Jessica Honegger, 2 G's, 1 N. Let me know that you're opening up your home, and, read along with me in the book. We are going to, do some read alouds in September. I'm going to be actually, posting a lot of the pictures of the people that are actually in the book and sharing kind of their current stories. And, really, it's just, we've only just begun. So, I would love for you, especially to find me on my Instagram community.
All right. We will do that. And I have all of that linked in the show notes for people. So check that out. Well, thanks again so much, Jessica, for being on today.
Thank you. I so enjoyed our conversation.
Well, I hope you guys are so encouraged. I just love Jessica's story because to me, it's the picture of really stepping out on that leap of faith, even when it doesn't make sense, even when you're not really prepared. And yet, when you're in those type of spaces, it's the opportunity for God to show how He provides through all of that. I love how He provided financially for their adoption through this, how He provided resources with people to come alongside her, and how He even provided for her in her motherhood journey and their family. I love how she talks about this imperfect courage. For so many of us, there's never going to be a time when we feel 100% secure about what we're going to do. And the good news is we don't have to have it figured out. But when we know that God is leading, we can still step out in faith and then watch how God steps in. Whatever God might be leading you today, I hope this encourages you to do it. So guys, I want to remind you that you can get all the show notes over at abidingministries.net. Make sure to follow us over on Facebook and Instagram at Abiding Ministries. And I would so appreciate it if you can take 1 or 2 of these things to do this week. First, if you haven't left a review on iTunes for the show, would you please take 60 seconds to do that over on iTunes? And also, please share this episode on your social media pages. It sure helps us get the word out about the show. All right, it's been so great to be back for season 9, and we'll see you next week on Feathers.